detail, but yeah, whatever you want to cover, I'm happy to.
Okay, cool. Ah, makes sense. Makes sense. Right. So Lease Authority has been around like way longer than.
Yeah, so originally it was founded in 2011.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we would do, and then I met Zuko from my previous job. I worked at the Open Technology Fund, and we actually funded Lease Authority to do audits of secure distributed technologies, like not blockchain, you know? Like
Yeah,
this is before,
like real
I mean,
technology.
Bitcoin existed by this point
Yes,
in time. Bitcoin existed, but like the other blockchains didn't exist yet. But
totally.
like again, I don't know how much you know about like the technical history of like Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, like with the cypherpunks, but there was like
Yes,
they were concentrated on distributed technologies like decentralization and stuff like that. And so
yes.
Bitcoin was one of the projects that people within that group talked about, but they worked on other stuff too. And so that was related to some of the stuff that I was funding.
Oh, yes. That
So
makes.
like Signal.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So before Signal was Signal, it was two separate apps called Red Phone and Text Secure. And Signal was like the combination rebranding. Open Technology
Oh,
Fund that I worked for funded that.
no
Like we
way.
funded. Yes.
That's crazy.
Because it all has to do with like secure communications and um, part of security is decentralization. Like
Yes.
that's an aspect of it. You
Yes.
can reduce the points of failure, you can reduce like honeypots and stuff like that. So there's like aspects to it, like, again, it depends on what your threat model is, but there's aspects of security that really support decentralization, which is where this all came from. But yeah, so there's other technologies that exist out there that follow the same principles but
Right.
don't have a blockchain, and they were being worked on for years and years. And so yeah, the Open Technology Fund funded those open source projects for secure communications and distributed technologies
Right.
like Signal and Tor. So I was
Oh.
funding those. So I was part of the program management that funded that, and then they needed audits, so at least
Oh.
Authority audited that stuff.
That's
So
crazy.
I was the program manager for like least authority to report to do these audits, and that's how I got to know Zuko.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's history.
Wait, and then how did how did the fund was it like is it similar was it like sponsored in ways by like Mozilla or something like no, it was
US government. US
really?
government. Yes.
Oh my god! Like that's the thing that yeah, because I was trying to because I know you were at like DC or something before, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so like again, there's history on these things. So like the U.S. government funds, like it was an internet freedom fund. Is basically it came from this internet freedom movement
Wow.
that was earlier, and so Congress started sending money towards internet freedom tools, basically to help spread democracy. It was foreign policy related, so to help
Okay.
democracy spread you need to, in order to have like to help
Yes.
democracy spread around the world, you need to enable people to speak out. Dissemination of information, you need to protect their speech. They
Mm.
need to have secure tools in order which to like talk about things that are happening. And so yeah, enabling like and empowering these secure communication tools to be better
Right.
was something that like the Open Technology Fund was tasked with. It was part of a bigger organization that helped like with, you know, news and stuff getting to different places. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. There's like this bigger fund. Some of it goes to the Department of State, and then some of it goes through the like other entities to get to the Open Technology Fund. It's now an independent nonprofit. When I was there, it wasn't. But yeah, it was fascinating because I think it was like it was around the time of, yeah, maybe right after Snowden, around Snowden stuff.
Oh.
um that all came out while I was there. But
Really?
around yeah,
Oh my god.
around that time there were these articles coming out about there was a big article that came out about how NSA was trying to break Tor at the same time
Okay.
the Open Technology Fund and Department of State were funding improving Tor. And so
Okay.
people were like, why is the US government funding both sides? And it's
Yeah.
just
They're like
Different
supporting
policies,
it and breaking it at the same time.
different agencies, different
Uh,
purposes.
right, because I know Tor came out of the Navy, right? Was that like the original
Oh,
thing?
like DARPA? Yeah,
Yeah.
it might have been
Okay.
DARPA. I don't know as much about the history of Tor because it's been around for a bit.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I can't tell. I would have to look up on Wikipedia if you want me to like
No.
drop those facts.
No, but it's so crazy how if you look at I don't know if the same things exist nowadays. I feel it's like the opposite. I feel like yeah, it's kind of
No,
crazy.
OTF still exists and it's now an independent nonprofit. When I was there, we were a program within another Radio Free Asia, actually. It was a different nonprofit to
Radio
help.
Free Asia. That's
Yeah, yeah.
cool.
Well, there's like Radio Free Europe, like I said,
Ah,
there's this umbrella organization that has these different purposes, but like one of them was Radio Free Europe. There was also Radio Free
ah,
Asia, and so yeah, it was about like, and our program just happened to sit under that, even though we were really looking globally, not
that
just at Asia with the tools. Because as you know, these tools
yes.
you can't restrict like who's using them based on their location. It's internet freedom. Like it's
Right.
global. So and all of the previous attempts to like do that don't work. So like Tor helps you circumvent, if people are trying to restrict your access to the internet based on where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy how yeah, I feel like I need to now Google a lot of stuff. But
Yeah, there's a lot of history and a lot's connected, and like that's where this technology came from, and now it's kind of reconnecting. Like
right.
these things took different paths for the past few years, but now a lot of this is reconnecting, and it's pretty interesting to watch because yeah, I mean, global decentralization, protecting people's ability to have privacy, and you need security for that. So yeah,
Oh man. Well,
it's fun.
okay. Okay. That makes sense. Oh. Then wait, so Signal was technically funded by the US government? Like I
Not completely, but
but
partially, yeah.
wow.
Some development along the way was,
Oh
yeah.
man.
It's all out there. Like it's
Yes,
not,
yes. But
there's nothing
it's
secret.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was, I mean, again, coming back to like how to best practices in the space, like
Mhm.
everything had to be open so that there wasn't any like, suspicion of like backdoors. So everything that OTF funded,
Yes.
it had to be open source. It had to have like, the audits had to be published, things like that, so that people would know that they didn't have to trust it. They could just go check.
Mm. Okay, understood.
I don't know if that's the direction you want to go today, but yeah, there's all
I
kinds of
mean
stuff to talk
that's
about.
totally cool. We should definitely talk about this. Like, actually, a question just popped into my mind earlier too, and I might just stick through this. But yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, wow, I did not know that. Hmm. It's yeah. Huh. And I guess that oh, oh, okay, okay. I'm just trying to now. It's like it's
I'm
kind of changed my
sorry.
perspective on a lot of stuff. That 5 minute changed a lot. Like,
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to like totally
no.
redo
In
your
a good way.
plan today.
In an amazing way. Oh, I see. Okay. Wait. So then, yeah, cause then okay. So then Zuko was doing audits way before like there was even blockchain stuff, and then he was like recruited in some ways to become the CEO of the electric coin company.
Well, I mean, so I can't speak for him, but
Right, right.
my understanding is that I mean, like about how this all played out is that Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is the first blockchain, and so
Yes.
a blockchain existed since like what, 2009. I'm forgetting my years.
Yeah,
um
2009, I believe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Officially.
So, I mean, it came like, so it was there. And at first, people thought that Bitcoin was pseudonymous.
Yes.
So that, that there was some privacy there. And then people quickly realized, or people realized over those first few years that although that the addresses could be correlated with other data to
Yes.
basically identify who was possessing them, so that it was not it, although it's they thought originally, sorry, I should say, they thought originally it was anonymous, and they
Yes.
discovered that it was more pseudonymous. And so now everybody appreciates that it's pseudonymous, but the original goal, like the original hope, was anonymity. and um
Yes.
and then, so when that was discovered, like, I mean, the kind of like people figured that out over the years. um and then at the same time, like, zero knowledge technology was, for, I mean, ZK stuff has been around for like 25 years theoretically in
Right.
academia, and there's papers written about it and everything, but it wasn't
Yes.
really possible. But at the same time, our computing power advanced significantly.
Right.
And people see these, and some people, like the seven scientists, I don't know all the details about who, whether it was Zuko or the scientists, like they can talk about the Zcash history better, but they
Right.
basically figured out that, like, if we fork Bitcoin, we can put in zero knowledge proofs using this, like, Zcash stuff, like whatever it was called back then. Was it Zcoin or something? There was that
Zero
first.
coin or something.
Yeah, zero. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't.
something
Again,
like
I
that.
don't know all these
Yeah.
specific details about that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you put that together, and then you have you have
Mm,
Zcash. So Zcash was a fork of Bitcoin and
right.
stuff
Right.
originally. I think a lot's changed technically since then.
Okay.
So,
Got it.
but maybe you can have one of the Zcashers like
Yeah.
join you
Yeah.
someday.
That would
And
be
get into
cool.
that.
Yeah, yeah, we're working towards that, probably to build a lot of trust with them. um, okay, well, I think as people join, first of all, I just want to let people know that we'll be recording this, and that we're gonna have a transcript of this, and it'll be posted on various channels. First of all, this is Liz. She's the CEO of Lease Authority. Uh, I'm a fan of their work, and it's just awesome. First of all, to have you. And Lease Authority is a uh, security auditing company, but they do much more than that. But we can dig into all of that later. And as a side note, for those that don't know, we're Hackbee. We're a bunch of developers that are just building cool stuff on things that are in line with Bitcoin's vision. We have projects in the Nostr ecosystem, in the Nervos ecosystem, and other places around decentralized file storage. Okay, so let's start. Liz, I just wanted to understand how you got into this space. I know we kind of dug into this a little bit, but if there was like a quick summary for people, like, yeah, there was like a long journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were recording earlier or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the how I got into this space, I was working at the Open Technology Fund before I
Right.
worked at, before I started with Leased Authority, and basically I met the Leased Authority team through my work at Open Technology Fund.
Right.
So Leased Authority existed since 2011. It was originally founded by Zuko, and Zuko, who's from the Zcash space. Zcash spun out of Leased Authority around 2015, and I took over in 2016 as CEO, so that Zuko and some others could focus on that.
Uh, and how did, like, was it weird transitioning from like a government sort of entity to a, like a, I guess, a startup in some ways?
Yeah, I mean, so the Open Technology Fund received money back then from, I believe they have other sources in addition to Congress at this point in time.
Okay.
But when I was there, I was the third person on that team hired. The program was new. It was a program within another nonprofit because it was like so startup-y.
Wait,
Like
there was only three people?
I was the third
Oh my
hired, yeah.
god.
So the program was new. I think
Okay.
OTF like only had started like about a year before I joined. And OTF, the Open Technology Fund, OTF now is an independent nonprofit. It's
Right.
much bigger. I believe they have, multiple funding sources at this point in time. But yeah, back then, yeah, we had funding that was designated through Congress, and it came through a government agency, but we were part of an independent nonprofit. And like I said, it was like the third person. So although it was like money coming from the government that we were
Mm,
using, we were very much more like a tech startup kind of. I mean, we weren't business, but yeah, it was definitely more low key and a different kind of workplace. So it wasn't like I have worked for the federal government and like local
yes.
government before in past and like in my past job history, and yeah, it was different.
Wow. And I think just as a note for everyone, uh, you said that uh, this fund also helped support. Uh, Damn, what was it called again?
Red, red phone and text
Yeah,
secure.
yeah,
Is that?
yeah, and yeah,
Yeah,
which
yeah, Signal. Before Signal was Signal, it was two separate apps, Red Phone and Text Secure, and then it was rebranded. Those two apps were combined and rebranded as Signal. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a little bit of history for everyone, and I think we should all dig into this, but it's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, and so you got to interact with the Signal team like fairly like early
Yeah.
in some way. Okay, wow.
Yeah, the Open Technology Fund, I believe again, it's still relatively close now as it was back then, but we were supposed to use the funding to help open source projects that advanced internet freedom. So that's Signal.
Um. Okay, so as people are joining, if for all of you that know, we're gonna be recording this, and you guys probably missed some cool stuff about what Liz was doing, but we'll go back to this in a little bit, and a little bit about uh, how you got this. Because is there something that made you go down this path of like going to like like internet freedom, privacy? I feel like it's not like
Yeah.
the normal like corporate job that people go to. It's not the thing they're fighting for. And I was just wondering, what is it that you think drives you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll try to summarize it, but throughout my career, I mean, I've been in tech my whole career,
Right.
and early on, I don't think I realized it as much, but over the years, you start to realize that technology is not exactly neutral, and that it really can enable and empower certain things.
Right.
And really have an impact on the world, whether it be just like, changing people's processes through digitization within an organization, or enabling people to be banked when they're unbanked and stuff, like to have actually access to financial services, financial inclusion. So I mean, you start to realize that technology has some sort of impact on the world, and so I realized that if I'm going to be in tech, I might as well be contributing to things that I believe in and I want to help.
Mm,
That got me into the open source space in Web 2. That got me into all kinds of interesting digitization efforts, including information access. And so I was very much in the space of how do we take, important information and make it more readily available to people.
mm,
And so I did a lot on that side, which is transparency essentially. And transparency is very much related to privacy, that the world needs both of these quite balanced, in order to have like good balance of like power dynamics in our societies. And so,
mm,
yeah, that led me to recognize that privacy matters, and privacy is very much enabled by security. So, you can't have private communications unless the communication tools are secure. You can't have, privacy without, yeah, basically security. So that's how I ended up here.
got it. Uh, I was just wondering if there was like somebody stole your thing when you were like young, and you're like, no, I gotta, like there's this like thing inside that's like driving. But yeah, it's that's interesting. It was like a very
Yeah, I
logical
mean,
process.
yeah, I think all of us have those moments through our lives where
Mm.
there's something that like there's like small turning points, but they're usually not that exciting. And you like 10, 20, 25 years pass and you look back and you're like,
Mm.
how did I end up here? And it was a lot of those little moments, not exactly one.
Ah. Understood. Understood. Okay. Um. So I wanted to go into a little bit of about lease authority
Yeah.
because I mean I looked on the website. You know, you guys got auditing services. You guys have like products. Like, and we were going a little bit like, what is lease authority? Like, what do you guys do? Like, who are you? You know, like,
The question of identity.
yeah, like, who are you?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah, that is something that as a I've been running the company now for 7 years.
Right.
And that's something that like we revisit periodically is like, what are we doing?
Right.
Why are we doing it? And I think those are good questions to periodically revisit. I would say that, for us, it really comes, we have a strong mission, and it comes back down to we care to help this technology be advanced in the world, to
Mm,
advance like the human right of privacy. Like I said, that is often done through enabling security. So we want to help projects be more secure. We want to build more secure tools ourselves too.
right.
And towards that end, of course, not everything has to be privacy oriented, but like I said, security is pretty fundamental to a lot of things. And so if our tools are reliably secure, then we can do a lot more with that technology and have that impact on the world. So we're a group of people that care about that stuff,
Right.
and then we try to adapt to the changing circumstances in the world too with these tools, and but also see the long game that
Right.
like we just got to keep working on this stuff and making sure that it's available to people.
And how many people are in lease authority like right now? As a yeah.
Yeah, I think about 27, so a little
Whoa.
under 30.
And what is the makeup of that? Is it just engineers? Is it like yeah, like poets? Like how does it work?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I love, yeah, sometimes we do talk about our like side hobbies and stuff, and there's
Yeah,
quite a
yeah,
variety.
yeah, yeah.
um but yeah, no, I mean, it's researchers and engineers mostly, and of course we have operations to staff to support
Mm,
everything, and like strategic staff and stuff like that. But yeah,
got it,
engineers and researchers. Yeah.
got it, got it. And I think there was a question in the chat from someone that says, "Is Tahoe LAFs still developed at lease authority?"
Yeah, so Tahoe LAFS, or Tahoe Laughs, sometimes we call it, and that stands for Leased Authority File Store.
Okay.
And the relation of leased authority is related to the principle of leased authority. So yeah, that tool, it actually started before leased authority existed. So
Okay.
it's an open source project that is independent of leased authority. But yeah, leased authority has greatly contributed to it over the years, and we have team members that actively developed on it in the past years, and we have a product based on it called private storage,
Hmm.
and that's basically a hosted managed version of Tahoe Laughs.
Hmm.
Oh, and I should say that Tahoe Laughs, I should tell you all what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
Please.
distributed secure storage.
Okay, so is it kind of like an encrypted version of IPFS? Like what would be a way to think about it? Okay.
Yeah, it has slightly different properties than IPFS, but yeah, it's got the security layer, that like the security integrated into it. So that's how it's different from IPFS. And then also IPFS is one large network. You participate in the IPFS network or you don't. Tahoe Labs has not quite the exact same properties. You can set up like smaller networks, and it can be used as P2P or as client server models.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is an entirely separate product now called private storage, which is managed by lease authority. Or
Yeah. So
who?
Tahoe Labs
Uh,
is the open source project. So the code is open out there. Anybody else can use it for other purposes.
okay.
Do what they want. Private storage is basically a hosted managed version of it.
Okay. Um. And speaking of that, uh, I'm curious what you think would be like. How how would you get people to use some service like this? Because everybody's so used to like S3 or Dropbox or whatever. They're like, well, I don't need. Like, do you think it's just convincing people that privacy matters, or is it like a functional thing? Like what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and this is my answer to this has changed over the years, as you know, people change. Like we all like as humans in societies, we advance our thinking through things. I think privacy didn't matter as much before a while. Like people were kind of, I don't want to say oblivious to it, but yeah, it's just like it wasn't at the forefront of our thinking with our technology. But over the years, we've come to recognize that the lack of privacy that we have in certain Web 2, I'm sorry, yeah, Web 2 systems, and just certain systems in general, that lack of privacy is a problem. This is why we got like regulations now, like GDPR and stuff.
Mm,
Those didn't exist because people didn't think there was a problem. Then you find a problem, you start to address it. The Snowden leaks, like things have changed over the years where people are starting to appreciate that privacy does matter more. Are they willing to pay for it yet? Probably
mm,
not really. And that's the other hard part is like,
right.
people recognize privacy, like, as humans, we recognize some things matter, but are we willing to change our habits or do things differently as a result? Similar to climate change, we all know it's a huge problem. What are we
Mm.
doing about it as people? So yeah, I think that it's just human nature that we shift our thoughts over time, but we also have lots of different priorities during our day-to-day life, and so how that plays out with like people paying for a tool, yeah, not as many people pay for it as I would like from a
Yeah.
business perspective. But I mean, I totally understand from the human perspective. And so, yeah, I think for privacy enhancing technologies like private storage, and, it's on us to figure out how to make it more convenient, more easy to use, more affordable for people, so that it can be used more. Yeah.
That's uh, I think what you're saying is like the benchmark of somebody paying for it is we're still like a little bit off from that. Um,
Seems like it. Yeah.
right. And do you think that that's just something that will do you think that will just like grow over time, or is that something which needs to be like it's something that needs to be pushed, like saying hey we like hence regulation, right? Like people are not going to do this voluntarily, you have to kind of force them to do it. Or do you think it's something like, let's say with climate change with electric cars, where there's just these new products that's just way more awesome and people will just
Yeah.
go to it? Like how do you, yeah.
Different people have different thoughts on this that are all valid, and I'm one of the people that thinks all these things are necessary.
Right.
That there's not one answer to the problem. That it's not just like regulation isn't the only answer, or cooler tools, or different business models. These aren't the only answers. I think we need to do all of these things together. But yeah, that's kind of a really vague general answer to that question. I think there's a lot more nuances and different tools and different use cases where people need privacy. Where there's certain cases again with the power dynamics where maybe you can't put it on the user. It has to be on the organization, that responsibility to make it more accessible or easier to use. But then in other cases, yeah, some of our habits have to just change.
So maybe on that we can segue a little bit to things around, I guess, uh, zero knowledge. Maybe not so much from a specific technical perspective, but I think there's a there's often like confusion around like zero knowledge for privacy, and then zero knowledge is in like some way of like shortening stuff, um,
Yeah, scalability. Yeah.
scalability. And I'm curious why do you think, for instance, things like Zcash hasn't like taken off more? Uh, do you feel that it's just? I mean, I'm a holder. I've been holding Zcash forever. I'm like, but maybe yeah, maybe there's something that's just like missing, or is it just technically so slow? Like, what is it? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, the specific case of Zcash, it's probably again a few factors that go
Right.
into it, and also just new technology just sometimes takes time to get adopted. I
Right.
mean, it always takes time to be adopted, and people have studied like over the years, like yeah, how does innovation get disseminated through societies? How does it get adopted? And then what's the tipping point for these things? And the answer is usually it's some element of timing
Right.
along with like just having the right thing at the right time kind of thing. And yeah, I think that, I mean, technically speaking, Zcash and what the team has done over the years is just amazing. So
Right.
they've got that part right. um and yeah, maybe it's an element of timing, I don't know.
Right.
And people understanding and being ready for it.
Okay. Got it. Uh,
But
and
you should
just
talk to the Zcashers, they would give you a much better
yes,
answer.
yes. Sorry, it was just after you mentioned it, it was just on my head since the beginning. So
Yeah.
that's the last question on Zcash. And as a note, for anybody that has any questions, feel free to just like type it in the chat or just speak up and happy to just answer these. Um, I know Lease Authority has audited some of the like top protocols. Like if you're just looking at logos, it's like you go to your website and it's like a list of who's who, right? Like that's it. Like
Yeah.
yeah, like um but I'm curious when you do when you do these audits, it seems like each project is so different. Like for instance, you audited Nervos, which is very different project than let's say Mina, or like
Yeah.
how do you build up the expertise to do these audits? Like what happens? Like yeah, like how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, again, like with technology, there's some things that, and like security especially, there's some things that are pretty fundamental, and
Mm-hmm.
how things need to like these principles that operate around security and how you have to like look for different things within systems that can be applied to any system.
Mm-hmm.
You just maybe the day to day of like doing that audit is a little bit different, but the principles of what's necessary for security still kind of remain the same.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Throughout those. But logistically, like just, as humans, there's lots of us who have had careers that like we've just done a lot, like windy paths through our careers and have a lot of different skill sets. And having a
Right.
team full of people with really interesting backgrounds and lots of different experiences really just allows us to, find that different combination of the right teams to look at the things. And then also it's a mindset too for the team members that, what's important, not necessarily, I mean, skills, of course, like understanding security principles and those kinds of like skills are necessary, but you also need this adversarial kind of thinking going
Mm.
into this. And again, that's something that can be applied to any technology. And it's more about the ability to think from that perspective sometimes than necessarily knowing exactly how, C works versus JavaScript. You need to know some of those differences to be able to like see the implementation of some of these principles and the issues there.
Mm.
But um, again, people with a variety of backgrounds helps, and then this kind of overall thinking. So
So security auditors need to have trust issues, and
you said it.
yeah, yeah. It's like that. Those are the best. It's like when you're filling out the application, you're like, yeah. So
Healthy paranoia.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, like healthy trust for the for our technology.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, again, a lot of this technology is doing like it's a huge impact on our life, and whether it's moving money or carrying really sensitive information about us, like
right,
it's important that it's secure. And yeah, I mean, like security is risk management.
right.
So I think there's a healthy amount of paranoia that's needed. Yeah. And mistrust. But yeah.
I'm wondering, do you think audits are particularly like common in Web three relative to other, like let's say a Web two industry? Like, I feel like before, when I was just, I don't know if our company, like I worked at Zillow for a bit. I'm not sure if we ever got audited. Like, yeah, why is that the case, or is that the case?
Yeah, I have reflected on this. This is interesting to see. I think there's an ethos and there's a necessity that's different than say Web 2. Web 2 with very centralized systems and like, closed source code, then, you can just kind of say, like, just trust us. Like, we're this big entity and we're taking care of the code. Just trust us.
Right.
We all know how that's working out. um,
Yes.
in some cases it's okay, but in a lot of cases it's really not worked for us.
Right.
And we have had all kinds of like data leaks and stuff like that. And so, like, but the architecture of the technology in Web3 is like, the ethos of, like, let's, focus on decentralization and empowering the end user, and, incorporate things like security and privacy at a different, especially privacy at a different level,
Mm.
but also that control, at a different level for people. That just necessitates a different kind of trust model, which is what we want, right?
Right.
And so instead of being able to just trust the centralized entity, you
Yes.
have to now trust the technology itself, because the technology is what's enabling your ability here. And so therefore, how do we trust it? We have audits, we publish those audits, and also we publish the code. So the publishing of the code, I think, having open source code be quite, it's not universal, but it's an important piece to the Web3 ecosystem.
Right.
Then that encourages, this publishing of the reports too. So I think the audits happen in the Web2 space. They do happen because we know that there's vulnerabilities and we know that there's problems. We know that security matters, but it's
Right.
just that, again, the threat model and the ethos is just a bit different.
Mm.
So a lot of those reports don't get published, and they're sometimes internal. But like you said, there's also plenty of companies that just don't do it.
Yes.
Or yeah, so I mean, it's just different.
Were there ever, okay, for instance, would you ever reject a company based on some sort of like philosophical value? Let's say if an FTX came to you, and I got nothing, I don't know, I'm not speaking, like, I'm not trying to, but like, if they came to you and you saw something in their code that you're like, I don't know, like, would you say, like, I would not audit them, or like I would, yeah, like, does that happen? Like, do you have to make a
Yeah,
decision?
yeah, it has happened very occasionally over the years.
Mm.
But I mean, really, it comes down to we want to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to be careful with your level of judgment. But there are certain lines that shouldn't be crossed,
Right.
So, like, we're not going to help a scam.
Right, right,
Like, clear scam. But if there's some people, like, who are trying to do better, but they don't maybe understand all the stuff yet and they need
right.
help, like, then they need just help. Like, it's like there's some element of like intent there. Like, if you're looking to scam people, no, we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you with that angle. But if you're looking to help, like, financial inclusion, and you just don't, maybe you just don't know as much about security, or there's some element that you don't understand as much, like
Yes.
about centralization of certain parts of your system, no problem. That's what we're here for.
Mm.
And the fact that there's a business involved with our work, I think, is key to that too. Because, again, if you're a scam, you don't really want to hire and pay somebody to, like, help how much you're scamming. It's not really, like,
Right.
I don't know, there's not really good incentive there.
Okay.
But if you legitimately want to improve the security of your project, then you will, possibly make it a priority to engage with a security auditing firm to help you do that. And so, there's a somewhat, there's arguably, like, there's a good incentive
Yes.
to have business be around this. Arguably, there's some stuff that happens in Web3 that isn't, like, good business model stuff, and so there should be some, subsidized audits in certain areas and stuff. But that's a different conversation. Yeah, but yeah. So if
Right.
somebody came to us that
Yes.
had, yeah,
So one thing that I've seen in this space is that, um, as security audits become more prevalent, it's become a like thing that a company does as like a logo that they put on their website
yeah,
saying that we've been audited, and you can trust us now. And there's like companies that do this. I don't think Lease Authority is one of them for sure. But how has auditing changed over the years? Like, what is where is the industry going? Like, yeah, how do you see it? And like the
yeah.
relationship between like apps and auditing companies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see it change. I mean, we did one of the first audits in like the Ethereum space. I think if not the first Ethereum audit back in 2015.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, in the 2000, and then there was more wave of stuff like with
Yes.
ICOs and stuff 2017. Back in that kind of time period, like we were really explaining things differently about like, yeah, security matters, and this is why you should get an audit. But like you said, that fast forward to now, like audits are now seen as like sometimes just for marketing, where yeah, we got an audit, so we're all good.
Right.
But of course, it's not that simple. But
Yes.
it's the good and the bad. More people recognize that the security audits matter. So of course, you're going to have different interpretations of like what needs to be done as part of an audit. I think as a community and as an industry, I mean, we just have to continue to ask ourselves, like, how do we ensure the best outcome for everybody? And, how do we advance all of our security knowledge? How do we make sure that these values that, like, we don't want to do security theater, we want the real results
Right.
from the real improvement, but also still at the same time have some tolerance for mistakes and experimentation, and because again, it's new technology and we have to be pushing forward with it, which means we're going to sometimes fail, and we have to get up and keep on going. So yeah, it's
Right.
as an industry, it's definitely changed over the years, and I think the next step for us as an industry is that to start to look at like where can we help to educate the users
Mm.
about like security audits, that like, yeah, okay, great, you're looking for the fact that it's been audited,
Right.
but let's dig that a little bit deeper now.
Because it's hard for the everyday user to, like, very few people is gonna read the audit report, right? It's like it's probably
Yeah,
just as complicated as the code, and
yeah,
there's like some intense analysis and right.
yeah,
Would it be to like
yeah.
simplify that report in some ways? Like what, or would it be to, yeah, like what would that look like?
Yeah, I think that that's like where we need to and where we are moving is that next level of, okay, now we've got, people getting audits, we've got the audit reports out there, but
Right.
is there some other way that people can, understand these differently? Can we help
Right.
present this information to users to help understand the nuances? Yeah, and I hope that we'll see more experimentation in this area too. And I think we are already little steps.
Right. There's been some like ideas I think that I saw some people implementing, which is around things like insurance. So
Yeah.
if you got audited, you have insurance. Like, do you think those things work? Like, does should an auditing company become an insurance company in some ways? Like, like what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've thought about this a little bit too. It's and talked to some people. I'm not, I don't have much in
Yeah.
the expertise around insurance, but
Yes.
there is an element of underwriting to insurance in the current insurance industry, and so
Right.
there is about like how do we translate that to our industry? And yeah, I think auditing companies can play a part in that. How tightly we should be, like how closely should we be working with the insurance companies? I don't know, but again, experimentation to see like and try some different relationships with that, just to make sure the incentives are correct and that there's not like conflict of interest in certain cases is I think all we have to be careful for.
Right.
But yeah, insurance is definitely one part. I think yeah, there's other things that like we can do, and again, we can learn from other industries and how we handle stuff with other types of products in our lives too.
Right. Oh, let's go.
Yeah.
We just got heated. Yeah. Does that make sense? So should an auditing firm take some responsibility if the audited project is exploited later? And can you
Yeah,
distinguish between a good auditing firm from a bad one? It's like through that, I guess that's
those
maybe.
are two different questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean,
Yes.
for the first one, I'm curious, like when people ask about responsibility, what does that mean to them? Like, it's one thing to say like, yeah, we audited, we're forced to take some responsibility if the report is published,
Right.
and but so, well, I shouldn't say we're forced. It's better to say, yeah, like we missed something. Um, take responsibility in that way. But do you mean like financial responsibility? Maybe that's what they mean.
I think that's maybe what they're saying, right? Like if a project got hacked after it was audited, should, like, is there some financial maybe responsibility that the auditing firm should take?
Yeah, possibly, but it just has to be architected in a way that makes sense because if you're bankrupting auditing companies every time they make a mistake, then that's also not good for the industry. We need to have sustainable businesses and solid business models. So I would say that the key around this is just figuring out like what the business model is. And this is, I think, insurance like kind of model
Mm,
where but auditing firms also should have their own insurance. But like, this is where, insurance, the concept or mutuals is like putting the money into one pool together. Everybody pays a small fee. And
yes.
then if you have a problem, then you get to pull out of it. And so, yeah, those experiments are one way to help with that. Um, yeah, we just have to make sure that the numbers work.
Yes, because we know that there are auditing companies whose projects have like, yeah, it's like it's there's like a list, and I think like every
Yeah.
project that they've audited has been like hacked or something. Like it's kind of something crazy. Not every, but anyway. Um, and then maybe the second question, like how what do you think makes a good security auditing company versus a bad one? I guess how, like, what do you think
I mean,
separates least authority from most authority from max authority?
well, I think that there has to be a certain level of like, so we're in the business of risk management. Like security is risk management. Like so, yeah, like we're in this business that's just hard. We're gonna occasionally fail. Like it's inevitable because you can't 100% guarantee like a risk won't, like something won't happen. It's all about managing like the likeliness and the impact of risks and stuff. And you could have somebody audit something for 2 years straight, and like some other human comes along and figures out how to get in. Like either,
Right.
so with auditing, there's a point, like there's a good amount that like we can find a lot, and then there's a point of diminishing returns again because it's about risks. And
Mm,
so there has to be some tolerance for mistakes and failure in our space. But yeah, we still have to hold people accountable for just, are you doing this work because you want to offer quality, or are you doing this to just make money? You
mm.
can make money and do quality work together. And, we all know this from all kinds of businesses. So just continue to make sure that we, work towards that.
Got it. Uh, so there's a question, and it's like, if an auditor finds a bug, uh, and deliberately held it from being exposed, it's like 0 days. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, is there, yeah, is there anything that prevents you from not saying anything?
I mean, that there's definitely like an ethical issue there. I mean, whether or not there's a legal issue, that's a lawyer question. I think it would depend on the jurisdiction, and also it would depend on how the jurisdiction handles like hacks,
Mm,
and knowledge of that stuff, and it would also probably depend on the contract, like the type of agreement and how those agreements are handled. Again, you need to have some tolerance that like that they don't get punished if they like it was like an innocent oversight. But if it's like an intentional
mm.
withholding of information, then that's bad. um oh, this is a good lawyer question though,
Yeah, that's an
about
int-
how it's handled.
yes, I think that's an interesting question because it's not saying like, oh, it's like alpha. Like I found something, I'm gonna like hack it. It's saying like, I'm not gonna say anything, right?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
understanding of this stuff in general is that like this isn't necessarily a new problem. Like this could happen
Mm,
with like home inspectors or some. I,
yes.
I don't know. It's a special problem in our space because of how things can be exploited and how much money is involved in some of these systems. But
Mm,
yeah, I think that there's like often considered like a standard of professionalism that's expected, like from the legal perspective, that yeah, and then there's probably something more there that could be done. But
mm.
yeah, that's bad. And I hope that like we would talk about that openly, like as an industry, so that because that's not cool. But there have been some scenarios too. I have seen some reports where there's some question of this or conflict of interest questions and stuff.
Uh,
Um, that's a tough one though.
So as a security auditing company, you will be never allowed to invest in companies.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I think we
You
can.
can?
There's
Okay.
no there's no rule against that. I think it's the like I see I the interest that I see more on like a logistical point would
Mm.
be like if you were a developer of a tool, you shouldn't be auditing it.
Oh.
Like that one's because I mean, first off, you're
Yes.
probably not the best auditor because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
wrote
yeah.
it. It's good to get fresh eyes, like all, external independent eyes on it, people reviewing it. Another one being like in this, like, I've seen some, like if you were somehow related to the project or an audited the project and then later
Yes.
on go do a bug bounty for this, you found a problem, don't report it, and then go do a
Right.
bug bounty or exploit it. I mean, if you're exploiting it, then you're doing something wrong in that stage. Um, but like the bug bounty, it's free to do. I mean, open
Mm.
to participate in those, but there's definitely, I think, an ethical and maybe a conflict of interest there. Um,
Got it.
yeah, and that's where I would say like maybe that's where the terms of participation for some of these types of things and then also the response just to hackers. But yeah, I hope that answers it.
Got it. Got it. Uh, One question, and then we'll go into kind of the quick fire and kind of just summary discussion is having audited so many different ecosystems. Like you've done stuff in, I guess, Ethereum, like EOS, I guess, and like other places. Like, do you think there is a particular type? Do you have okay? So it's split in two parts. Do you have a bias towards a particular type of architecture for the blockchain ecosystem? Like, do you think that one is better than the other? Okay. Yes. And then the second is, do you think there is a difference in how applications are built, the type of people working on them? Like, what do you see across these ecosystems? And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great question, and I think this is like the $1 billion question too. If I
let's
could tell
go.
you like which blockchain's the
Yeah,
best, then
come on.
yeah.
There's only one right answer. No, I'm joking.
Well, I mean, I think what I've seen happen is that people are developing so blockchain technology, it's been around. People make changes to this kind of fundamental idea for different purposes. So one project might say, we want to help the speed of processing of transactions, so we're going to make this technical change to it. Another one might say
Yes.
we value privacy, so we're going to make a technical change to implement more privacy and stuff. And that's basically what's been happening over the years, is that like, okay, we're going to change, we're going to turn this dial and see what that is. And there's just a lot of that goes. So I don't think that there is like one that's better. It depends on what your goal
Mm,
is. Obviously there are some chains that like can do certain things
right.
maybe more effectively or efficiently at this point in time.
Right.
And I just say at this point in time because they're still in development and
Yes.
there's still more that can be done. So, and I think the important part is to just that they all learn from each other, and that again, it depends on your philosophy. That I think that like the way that technology works in our world tends to be that we have a
Mm,
limited number of choices that tend to be popular,
right.
operating systems, browsers, etc. That's what we like gravitate towards. And so I suspect that this would follow the same path, that there's gonna, and that seems to be what's happening to a degree right now. Um, but it's moving.
Right.
Yeah, it's technology. You can look over at your competitor and say, oh, cool. They figured out some scalability stuff. I'll do that too. And people should.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'll give you a pass on that answer. It's
But
no, no, no.
okay,
That was
but
very
I
good.
can
Yeah.
say like,
Yeah.
yeah, there are some that have better technical quality and better security properties than others, of course. Yeah.
Right. And would you say those are? Do they like what letter do those chains start with? Like, no. I'm totally just curious. Like, I'm just honest opinion from like. Do you think there is some chains that just have better security, like inherently, because of the way they're architected or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of them are more mature, and so they've had
Ah, okay.
time to develop in different directions. But
Right.
security isn't
Yes.
like one layer; it's multiple layers. So one chain might have a lot more nodes that are independent
Mm,
from each other, and then others might be able to like transact in a different way, like the way the block is written, and so that can avoid certain types of issues. So yeah, I mean, like there's all kinds of different levels of it,
right.
and I don't think anyone to this at this point has kind of really gotten all of those points covered. But
Mm,
like I said, we're working towards it as everybody just advances in different ways,
right.
and then share that. But yeah, yeah, and it's priorities too. So what's your priority for the system? What's the user's priority for how they're like interacting with it?
Right. Okay. Understood. Um, and then curious. We'll just switch up, and then we can also just go into questions. But as a CEO of a remote company with like dozens of people, how do you survive on a day to day basis? Like what have you learned just doing all of this? Like yeah.
Oh, flexibility.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, like we're around the world and we're all different humans with all kinds of like different lives.
right.
So we have to be flexible with each other, but we have to be really accountable with each other too.
Mm,
So, and just make sure we know what our priorities are for work and, deliver. So, yeah,
mm,
if you want to work at 2 a.m., that's fine. If you want to work at 3 p.m., that's fine, but just get it done.
mm,
And get it done in a way that you're accountable to that you're caring for your coworkers and, we're all working together as a team, but have space to be individuals. So, yeah, it's just making sure that the priorities are clear with the team, that we have some level of flexibility and forgiveness
right.
for being like, for our personal lives and the things that,
Right.
impact us. But yeah, that we all are here for a reason and that has to drive you. And if it's not, then you belong somewhere else in
Do you think there's
a
a
nice way.
yes? And do you think there's a particular thing that you've implemented that you feel are great? Uh, okay. Well, let's go. One more question. We'll say, are there any layer two projects on, I guess, for Bitcoin layer two, on Lease Authority's audited list? And what's your definition?
Oh,
Yeah, like, how,
not a dictionary.
yeah, but like, I guess,
Yeah, I mean, what are these layers?
yeah, like
Yeah, I mean,
for
layers on
Bitcoin, I
top
guess.
of are related to. Yeah, I mean, if it's the Bitcoin question, yeah, we've worked with stacks. I
Right,
don't know
yeah,
if you want to call that like an L2. I guess some
right,
people do.
right.
Yeah.
But no,
So
oh, go ahead, please.
um, were you going to ask about other blockchains?
Oh no, I'm just saying, like, how would you define, what do you think makes a layer two on Bitcoin?
Oh, this is like, oh, what that makes a layer two on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I
like,
think
how do you
generally
define
that
it?
the layer two definition is just that there's operations happening independent of the underlying blockchain, but it's interacting with the underlying blockchain at some point in time, like
Hmm.
as some part. Otherwise, it would be an independent chain, right? If it's never touching to that other chain,
Hmm.
but that could also be like yeah, it could be defined in different ways.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, you guys are quizzing me on this now.
Yeah. Let's go. No, no, no. Last, I think it's like,
Oh
for
yeah, so
any.
yeah,
Yeah.
they said I mean L2s on any blockchain. Yeah, so yeah, we've definitely worked with L2s on Ethereum. I don't know if in the Cosmos we've done stuff in Cosmos too. I don't know if those are considered L2s though.
Mm,
Um, I mostly hear the L2 label used for Bitcoin and Ethereum so far.
mm,
But I'm sure there's other blockchains. We've done so much. We have we have over 100 audits published on our website. So
right.
yeah,
Got
yeah.
it. And I think you would say that Stacks is kind of a layer two. I guess. I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier. Like, it's sort of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the layer two term I hear just mostly with Ethereum.
Right.
Like the Bitcoin space, like there's some things that are kind of similar, but like they're kind of different. So sometimes there's different terminology, like has happened with NFTs and ordinals. Like
Right.
It makes sense to call them something slightly different.
Maybe there should be a better name for it. Yeah.
That layer twos?
Yeah, for Bitcoin, I guess, or for other chains, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I am too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm sure that we could Google some like basic definitions of layer twos, but again, this technology is changing and how we interact, and we're experimenting. So we can change that definition tomorrow. And then do we call it an L? Like it's slightly different. Do we still call it an L2, or do we make up a new name for it? I don't know. But yeah, from my perspective, at this point, people usually use that term if there's if it's operating, doing some operations independently of an underlying blockchain, in the
Right.
sense that it might even have its own blockchain, but it's relaying some information and to another more fundamental blockchain or more established.
Right. Okay.
I don't
Uh.
know.
Yep.
Have to debate that one.
Cool. Well, if anybody has any questions, please just shout it out. But I'm gonna go through. Oh, two more. Is it, auditing is an one-time.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of incremental, continuous auditing practice?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is a great question too. So asking about like the kind of project approach, definitive end, like here's the definitive scope and end of an audit versus like continuous auditing. Um, yeah, so with there's different approaches to this, and there's kind of pros and cons to it too. With most audits to this point have been framed as projects where there's a definitive scope and there's a definitive end. And yes, for the most part, we do want to look at fixed code, like we want to look at like a commit from a point in time. There can be some changes as we audit, but that also tends to like if the changes become too much, then it becomes inefficient, because we need to look at the entire thing. That being said, that once we've looked at an entire code base, it then depends on like what is the software development lifecycle, what are the features that are moving forward from that point in time. If you're and also how how that code base has been architected. So
Right.
some people develop like if you're making fundamental changes to the design, yes, you want a complete re-audit. If you're just
Yeah.
layering on some features in a more modular fashion, then we can do component type approach, component follow-up audits.
Right.
Or if there's like a clear diff of changes that only touch part of the code base, then there can be like an audit of the diff. And so there's some practices like that we can like work with how the software development plans are, like how that roadmap is and evolving. But yeah, I mean, especially like things like smart contract space, like that, like when smart contracts are changed, it can have like a really fundamental, it's not a lot of code, but it's a fundamental change. Maybe needs to be re-audited, or again, people could look at the diff. Yeah, so what we're seeing happen over the years though is that, in the beginning, people were like, I'm making a thing. And now their things are started like, and so then it was like, okay, we'll do a project to audit it. Makes sense. But now these things are like, maturing into real products. And, there's like now dApps are being built on blockchains, and, there's whole ecosystems developing and stuff like that. And so of course the model has to shift too. But typically it's, yeah, typically it's a one big project. It's a project and then maybe smaller projects that follow. Yeah.
Got it.
I think the only thing I can add to that is that there's efficiency of working with the same team in those follow-up audits because they've already seen the fundamental, then they've done the fundamental review. But then there's also benefit to working with new teams. It's less efficient, but it's also better for security sometimes to get a whole different team. So you see sometimes projects will get audits by 3 different auditors, and that can be a good thing.
Got it.
So that's more of a business
Right.
decision
Yeah, it's not
about
a
like
technical one. Yeah.
your security risk like your threat model of like, do we need fresh like independent reviews of this versus the efficiency and cost savings perhaps that comes with working with the same team longer.
Got it. There's a last question which says, do you have concerns with Bitcoin security if its block reward reduces even more than it is now? Like there's less reward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there should be, again, it's a risk, right?
Right.
And I think that risks you have to mitigate if you can't remediate them. Like, let's look at how we can mitigate that. So I think it would be good to for um, generally when you're handling any security risks, you don't want to say it's not a problem. Let's not analyze it. We
Right.
should analyze like, okay, like if that does introduce some level of like how can we quantify that risk and what's the impact of that risk?
Mm,
So yeah, I think that would be important to dig into.
got it. Economic and tokenomic risks, essentially. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Uh, to end, then I'm gonna ask: is there something that you wish there is more of or less of in our ecosystem? And is there a project or thing that you wish we knew about that maybe that you're excited about? So two things.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think we just need to continue to have conversations about like the management of security
Mm-hmm.
and how we want to handle that as an industry. We're still in these like days where we're like we're off on our little world like working on this stuff, and like the rest of the world has is only just starting to look at what we're doing.
Right.
And so we have this opportunity to really decide for ourselves as an industry how we want to handle some stuff before others try to come in and tell us how to do
Mm,
it. Or like change that anyway. But I also think
yes.
ethically it's good for us to care about security as an industry, and just have more conversations about this, like what should we be doing with those audit reports, and like how do we define quality audit versus not.
Right.
We Some of us just kind of know, but how can we help those who don't know?
Mm,
How can we help more people who don't have the experience that we have just get into the space and understand how to navigate it and things like that? Because
got it.
that wave is coming at some point in time. Like I'm sure all of you have the experience where like your friend is like, hey, I think I'm ready to own some Bitcoin. Or I want to start, I want to learn more about this. Like they ignored it for years now. They were asking questions. How do we help them?
Yes.
And how do we help them be secure? Because it's not in any of our interest if everything blows up in people's faces just because
Yeah.
they're not experienced. Um, yeah, what was the rest of your question? I think,
The other one was just: are there some things that you think we should know about, like projects
yeah,
or tools or ideas?
there's so much happening these days, it's hard to keep track of. I think that I encourage people, if you don't know about zero knowledge, to look into it more also, but don't ignore things like fully homomorphic encryption, and of course multi-party computation you're probably familiar with too. But these
Mm,
are tools that we can use, and we're just scratching the surface as to how we can use some of these cryptographic like tools. Um, and I encourage people to dig into that kind of area some more.
okay.
Um, and then I also suggest history, like you and I were talking about before this started,
Yes.
that there's a lot of interesting history of where some of this technology came from. People have, experimented in certain ways in the past, and we can learn from them. So
Mm, got it. And if there are like follow-up questions, I can like email those to Liz or something. But I think it's been long enough and got a lot of work. But thank you everybody for coming here. Thank you, Liz, um, and Lisa Thari's on Twitter. You're on Twitter. You're on the internet, and we'll be putting the videos out for this, and would love to be able to do more stuff in the future, host things, and you're amazing. Thank
it
you.
was so great to chat with you. Thanks so much for inviting me, and thanks everyone for joining and asking your questions. It's fun.
Yeah, I just saw two more pop up, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, then maybe we'll have to do another session sometime.
Deal. Let's do that. Well,
Cool.
all
All
right.
right. Well, thanks.
No, thank you. Take care.
Do. Bye.
Bye.